Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Hope you're doing well. It's been a minute, or it feels like it has, so let's get into some doll making. Today I'm going to be making my Devil Homura to complete my two-part mini-series of dolls from Pula Magi Madoka Magica. She's going to go alongside of course, Goddess Madoka. If you haven't seen that video yet, you can find it in the link in the description. So I'm also going to be using a Mad Hatter for this doll, so they have like the same height basically. I wanted to use a taller doll because their dresses are so elegant, but they're also like young characters, so I wanted the height to match their age, sort of. So starting off prepping and painting the scalp black, and I'm going to be using some high quality nylon fibers from the Doll Planet. I cut the hank of hair in half because Homura does not have floor length hair, thankfully. And so now I have extra hair for rerooting, and it'll be the length I want it to be when it's rooted in the head anyway. So it may look really short right now, but I promise once it's rooted in the head and then boil washed flat, it'll look pretty long still. Of course, I don't want to subject you guys to watching me reroot this doll for 3 hours, so we're just gonna skip ahead. And here's how she's looking with a full reroot and her first boil wash. So I've covered up the hair with a piece of fabric because it's about time for the face up, but before that I put the head back on the body. So for my face up, I'm going to be heavily referencing my Goddess Madoka's face the entire time because I want them to have similar style but also different personality. So for Homura's face, I just start in with some watercolor pencils to sketch out the eye shape. I know usually I go in with blush first, but I guess I just wasn't really feeling blush today. I add it later, but I think I wanted to make sure I knew where the eyes shape was going to land instead of just putting blush on her eyeshadow when I didn't even know where her eye crease was going to be. So I wanted Homura to look elegant, but not overly elegant, if that even makes any sense. Like, not a girly elegant, but like a stern elegance that kind of scares you. So that's why I didn't want her to have long, fluttery eyelashes, more just short, blunt eyelashes. So now I'm just sketching in the shape of her iris, and this is where I wanted the style to really be similar to Madoka's, and I wanted to make everything cohesive. So the only difference really with the iris is that her pupils are going to be completely filled in because it gives off the more darker vibe. So I start filling in her iris with a red watercolor pencil and then giving that a gradient blend into a purple as the shadow color, and then her pupils are going to be a really deep purple, almost black. So now that I finally have her eye placement, I'm going to add the first layer of blush. I just add a little bit of pink to her eyelids because I don't really want it to look like she's wearing a lot of makeup, and then I dust on some on her lips as well. So I also use a little bit of chalk pastel to define where her eyebrows are going to be placed, and then I sketch on a line with watercolor pencil and then fill out the brows. Then I'd start defining some more features by adding some blush to her cheeks, a little bit more on her eyes, and then to her nose, and I also gave her some nostrils with watercolor pencils and the little dimples in her smile. So here is where I decided to add a few more eyelashes, nothing too crazy. I just felt like she was looking like flat. After this, it's finally time to paint these scleras with some white acrylic paint. I use my tiny detail brush and I hold my breath. Her irises were looking almost like one solid color, so once I added the eye shines into them, it really separates the depth of what is her pupil and what is not, so I am very glad that worked out. Of course, I still have to add a little bit of highlighter, but nothing too sparkly. So now I'm finally cutting her bangs, and I don't know what the problem was, but no matter how many times I boil washed these bangs, they did not want to lay flat. So I just tried my best and used the headband later on to try and keep them down. So after I finished my struggle with that, it was time to move on to a greater struggle, which was painting on Homura's leggings, tights, stockings, I'm not sure. So I looked far and wide for a fabric that matched Homura's stockings, and it's impossible. There's nothing in the world that I could find. So I just went ahead and painted them on myself. I had the correct purple paint, and I figured this can't be too difficult. Unfortunately for me, this probably took the most time out of anything for this doll to complete. So I painted on the purple legs first, and then with a mechanical pencil sketched out the checkered pattern onto the legs so I wouldn't mess it up, and I still messed it up quite a few times, and I realized, oh my god, the pattern is not laying down correctly. I missed a square, but in the end, it all came out fine, I think. These sharp edges and lines were so painful for my eyes to try and complete, but I pulled through. So once her stockings were finally fully painted on, I did not want to lose any of that progress, so I added a layer of some Liquitex High Gloss Varnish. Of course, I'm not done painting the body just yet. I still need to give her some black gloves, which go up right past her elbow, and I love using this black paint, honestly, because it doesn't chip away, it goes on nice and smooth in one easy coat, and I have no problems. So here is how she looks with her gloves and stockings completely done. I also added a layer of Liquitex to her gloves just to make sure the paint stayed on correctly. So moving on, I have some red ribbon, some ostrich feathers, which are real, and I did not realize that before I bought them. Some PU leather fabric, not like it's fake leather, but anyway. For her dress, I'm going to be using all of these ostrich feathers to give off that feathery look she has on her dress, and I'm very excited. So before we get started on the dress, because I never seem to do things in order, I need to make her some shoes. So I'm just going to use some epoxy sculpt because Homura is wearing like some very simple Mary Jane wedges, kind of, sort of. So I just take 2 parts, mix them together, and then I spread them in equal parts, half, and just mold them on with my fingers. So now I set her aside to dry, and while the epoxy is curing, I start working on the dress. So I'm cutting out a piece of some black cotton fabric that I'm going to be using as the base, and then one by one, layer by layer, I start gluing on pieces of the ostrich feathers. I start from the bottom of the dress so you cannot see the ribbon lining of the feathers once you add more and more layers, and it just builds up very nicely. I was worried that this would make the dress look way too bulky, but then as I kept going, the feathers stayed very flat and the dress looks really nice in the end. So I go ahead and do this to both sides of the fabric. I'm only going to show you one side, and then once that is done, I added a gathering stitch at the top, and now it's time to work on the bodice. Homura's bodice of this dress is it's like there's nothing there, and I had no idea how to do this, if I'm being completely honest, because it's just like these 2 strips and it's very like geometrically shaped, and I was like, oh man, this is not going to stay up on a doll, but I kind of figured it out. With dolls like this, it's really just trial and error until you figure out how to do it and it looks good. So I cut the slit down for her neckline, and then I added a tiny piece of thread at the top because there is no way that was going to stay together. So here I'm gluing on a thin piece of black ribbon that I'm going to be using to tie the dress in the back, because there is no back of this dress, it's only a front. So by the time I had finished the dress, the epoxy was fully cured on her shoes, so I painted them black and added the black detail strap thing, and then I added some more Liquitex high gloss varnish. I also realized by this point that I'd forgotten to cut the 2 pieces of her hair that frame her face, so I went ahead and did that. I also had to finish off her headband by adding a big red bow made from the same ribbon. So now that that detail is done, it's finally time to move on to the main element of this doll, which is of course her wings. So I have some white cotton fabric and 2 different types of aluminum wire. So I cut out a free-handed shape of the base of her wings, and then I sewed them, flipped them inside out, added a little bit of cotton, and added the wire so they are padded and bendable. I also bought a bunch of these fake feathers, and they are not the shape that I want them to be, so I one by one took my scissors and cut the feathers into the sharp pointed shape that I was looking for. So my only method of attaching the feathers to the fabric was using some hot glue, so one by one I went ahead and added a little bit of hot glue to the stem of the feather and then just stuck it right on the fabric. So after all that was done, the wing ended up looking like this, and I still need to add a bit of the black aluminum wire to like the details on the top of her wings. I'm not really sure what it is. So I just bent the wire into the correct shape and then used some more hot glue, of course, to keep that secure onto the fabric. And then there is a little bit of wire sticking out of the base of the feathers, wings I mean, and I used that wire to wrap around Homura's arms and like on her shoulders so they weren't quite visible. And with that, she's done. So I know in this picture there's a little bit of a panty shot, but I promise it's just because it was windy out when I took these photos, and I was like, I'm just gonna pretend I didn't see anything. So I ended up being really happy with how this doll turned out, because there was several times in the middle of this project where I was really nervous about how it was looking, and I was like, I don't think this is gonna turn out exactly how I want it to, but it came out looking what I think would be great. And next to Madoka, she looks incredible, and I am so glad to have these dolls finished, because I thought this was going to be a really painstaking project for me, but I'm very happy about it. And I'm going to be selling these two as a set over on my Etsy shop and my Instagram. If you are interested, you can send me a DM, or you can go straight to the listing. If you like this video and want to see more dolls from me in the future, don't forget to click the link in the description, or maybe even subscribe, and you will never miss a video or a new post from me. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!